unacceptable and indefensible. I'm Mariam Namazi, you're watching Al Jazeera Live from London. Also coming up, out of control. A warning from aid agencies as the Ebola virus forces Liberia's government to take drastic action. International monitors finally reached the crash site of the Malaysian airliner in eastern Ukraine after 4 attempts. And another twist in the scandal surrounding the death of a former Russian spy. We begin in Gaza, where the UN chief, Ban Ki-moon, and the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, are expected to announce a joint call for a 72-hour ceasefire. This follows Israel's announcement that it will continue its military assault on Gaza until all tunnels built by Hamas are destroyed. The United States has again criticized Israel for bombing a UN shelter in Gaza. The shelling of the facility on Wednesday resulted in the deaths of 19 Palestinians, including women and children. Let's look now at those latest casualty and displacement figures after 24 days of fighting. The health ministry in Gaza says that 1,423 Palestinians have been killed and 8,265 injured. According to the UN, more than 200,000 internally displaced Palestinians are in its shelters. Meanwhile, on the Israeli side, 56 soldiers and 2 Israeli citizens have died. 1 Thai national working in Israel was also killed. Our diplomatic editor James Bays is in West Jerusalem for us. And James, why could a joint UN-US call for a ceasefire succeed where previous attempts by Ban Ki-moon and John Kerry have failed?
Well, it's a very bold move, and it's possible it won't succeed. But I think what it does is get the UN and the US ahead of where we've been in the past, which is one side declaring a unilateral ceasefire and the other side not accepting it. This would put the international community ahead of that. They would demand that there is a unilateral ceasefire for 72 hours. I can tell you that all this week, Robert Serry, who is the UN Special Coordinator, has been trying to get a 72-hour ceasefire behind the scenes by negotiating with either side. Now I think they're going to go public with the moral authority of both the Secretary of State and also the Secretary-General to try and get this to happen. I understand, though, they're not going to surprise anyone. They are speaking to both sides behind the scenes. Those talks are still going on, as I understand it, so no announcement yet. We're expecting something if they manage to get some sort of tacit agreement from both sides in the coming hours, probably before midnight local time. That's in a couple of hours from now.
And where are we on possible negotiations set to take place in Egypt to broker something more long-lasting, something more sustainable? What are you hearing about that where you are?
Well, certainly what we're talking about right now is 72 hours of humanitarian pause. This isn't the final deal to the situation. There'll need to be these negotiations. Both the US and the UN still talking about Cairo, as you say, as the place that negotiations will take place. They need to try and find a mechanism that will satisfy both sides. I can tell you the UN may well have a role in this. I'm told at the talks at the weekend in Paris, the British proposed the idea of international monitors in the Gaza Strip to look at the borders of the area, and that will be a way perhaps to keep Hamas happy that the siege was beginning to be lifted, that the restrictions were being eased, but also keep the Israelis happy that there was going to be no more rockets fired from the Strip into Israel.
All right, James Bays, our diplomatic editor there for us in West Jerusalem. Thanks very much. Well, just before we go to our reporter Nicole Johnston in Gaza City, we can show you this moment in the last hour when a rocket passed incredibly close to where she and the Al Jazeera team were standing. Live now to Nicole Johnston, who's in Gaza for us. And Nicole, quite a remarkable moment there. I mean, I think we got a sense of the sound and the sort of circumstance that you were in at that point in time. What's been happening in the past few hours? Was that outgoing rocket followed by further missiles, further projectiles?
At this stage, it's just been the one rocket, thankfully. It seemed to have been fired fairly close to where we were. There has been a lot of rockets outgoing towards Israel over the past couple of hours. The Palestinian factions are saying that they fired rockets towards Beersheba, into the Eshkol region, Ashdod, Tel Aviv. So quite a few different locations there, as well as Kiryat Gat. And the information we're getting from Israel is that there has been some light injuries of about a dozen people from some of those rockets. There's also been airstrikes inside Gaza over the past few hours. We've had reports of 2 airstrikes in the middle of Gaza City. 2 people were killed. And a couple of airstrikes in the central part of the Gaza Strip, around Deir al-Bala, and 8 people were killed there. Just in the last hour, though, there's been quite a bit of tank shelling in various parts of Gaza. I mean, that sort of continues off and on for most of the day around